So you know that fire is a tool, right? Well, I have lots of fire tools in here. I've got MAP gas, I've got propane, acetylene, and a couple of solid fuels, because sometimes only a fire will get you out of a jam. I'm going to show you a few of those cases right now. One of the most counterintuitive ways that you can use heat, to get a job done is by expanding metal. Cy Swan built his cannons, sweating or friction welding steel together. I'm using a boiling pot on a coal fire to heat up a bearing so it will slip easily onto the end of an 1.5 inch shaft. It doesn't have to expand much, but it has to expand a little, and that's where heat comes in. Just a little bit of heat, 212 degrees, reduced the interference. That bearing just fell right onto that 1.5 inch shaft. This is its brother, cold, room temperature, would have had to drive it on. So why 3 gases? Because each gas has a different cost and a different high temperature. Least expensive is propane. I'm switching over so that I can cut and heat big pieces with propane. That's what this regulator is about. But lots of plumbers use propane for sweating and soldering. Propane burns around 2,000 degrees, naturally aspirated. That is, the oxygen is coming from these holes in the back of the burner. MAP gas, more expensive, much hotter, about 3,500 degrees, also naturally aspirated. It can get much hotter than that if you force oxygen into it. So less money, less heat, more money, more heat. And then acetylene is the big dog, both in terms of cost and how much work you can get done. Let me show you. So acetylene is hot, right? Hot enough to easily do this. That's more heat than you need to do this, but boy, too much is always enough, right? Propane will also cut. I've just set my shop up with a dedicated propane regulator so that I can save a little money. Like I said, this is more expensive. It's hotter. There's more you can do, but propane is probably half the cost. We're going to set that regulator up here in a minute and see if I can figure out how to cut steel with propane instead of acetylene. Now, a couple of safety things. All 3 of these gases, MAP gas, propane, and acetylene, are heavier than air. That means if you have a leak in your system, the fuel gas that's getting out is settling down to the ground, and it will creep and it will fill up the space from the bottom up. Now, they're all odorized. Propane has a kind of a familiar rotten egg smell. Acetylene has an acrid, I'm not sure if they even have to odorize acetylene. You can smell these things. But if you get a leak in your system somewhere, you're going to have a big problem. That's the first safety consideration. The second is things like you never oil your gauges. Don't put oil on the gauges. Don't oil the threads. Don't oil anything because it's combustion that you're dealing with. So no oil. You see where that red line starts? That's about 15 PSI. Right now we're turning it up. We're about 10. I like to run down around 7 or so for cutting. I was a little higher for a rosebud. But my point is, acetylene is so volatile that if you turn the pressure up past 15 pounds, as soon as you open the valve, it will spontaneously burst into flame. Think of what that sort of reality means if I were to tip this over and knock the neck off of that thing. This, my friends, and the propane to a lesser degree, is in fact a bomb in the shop. Now, this is not an exhaustive safety video. I recommend you find an exhaustive safety video. But when you turn your acetylene on, you only turn it on about 1/4 of a turn. That's because of how volatile it is. If you get a problem in the shop, you want to be able to turn that off like that instead of all the way down. Now, oxygen, on the other hand, should be turned all the way on so that the valve seals at the top of the throw, because you got all the time in the world if you need to get over there to turn the oxygen off, because it's not a fuel, it's an accelerant. Now this is an old Parker vise. There's an example here of one of the biggest brazing jobs I've ever seen, and I'm going to want you guys to explain this filler metal to me. Took a lot of heat. This is a very rusted old bolt, a nut on a bolt. I'm going to demonstrate that you can't, or you shouldn't, just walk up and indiscriminately get the whole thing hot if you're trying to get that nut off. Because in the same way that heating up the collar on that bearing, the race, allowed it to slip over the shaft, if you can concentrate the heat on the nut, it will tend to grow much more than the bolt will if you can keep the bolt a little cooler. Maybe the most typical use case is you've got a stuck bolt. You just can't get that nut off there. You can't turn the bolt out of, heat, right? You can use this stuff and spend time. This is good, but sometimes a penetrating oil just won't do it, but a hot wrench will. I don't need a big flame because I'm going to try to concentrate the heat on the nut rather than on the bolt so that the nut expands faster than the bolt does. We're essentially doing exactly what we did with that bearing race in the boiling water. I'm going to get a little more heat. I'm going to add more fuel and a little more oxygen. Neutral flame. A neutral flame means that there is the right amount of oxygen for the fuel. You don't have unconsumed fuel and you don't have wasted oxygen. That big square nut is in contact with that big flat bar, so the bar is soaking up the heat out of the nut. But that's all right. I've got an acetylene torch. Now if you're wanting to save the nut, don't get too close, because there where those little white cones are, it will melt the steel. All right, I'm betting that that's hot enough to be very loose. Let's try it. Dull glow. Off it comes. No penetrating oil and not much time. Now that's not exactly a hot wrench. When you say hot wrench, what you're thinking of is cutting the bolt off, which you can always do and sometimes faster, like this. Sometimes a cutting torch is the shortest distance between 2 points. So another common use in a shop is getting a piece of steel hot enough to either bend or straighten. This 5/8 shaft, piece of round stock, has been bent. And I'm going to see if the MAP gas I have left in this bottle at 3,500 degrees will get that hot enough to straighten. I may run out, but it's okay, because I've got the acetylene right behind me. Yep, this is too slow. I'm going to get Mr. Acetylene torch. So one of the advantages of a cutting torch is you can put multiple torch tips on here. I'm going to put a rosebud on this valve body. A rosebud, unlike a cutting torch, which can be used for cutting, a little bit of welding, a rosebud is made specifically for heating. And let me invite you guys, the guys that really know, the welders, the fabricators, the instructors, the people that really know. You can make fun of me all you want. I'm kind of a shade tree welder cutting torch guy. But in the comments, explain to people why a rosebud needs so much more fuel, more air, what the popping back means and little explosion that happens when the fire gets back up into the tip, all those things, because I'm not going to cover those. But I am going to turn the pressure up. I'm going to turn that up, and I'm going to turn this pressure up. And we're going to light this thing up and make something happen. So controlling the heat is controlling the bend. One side of this bar is going to get shorter and one side's going to get longer. The sides that get shorter, which is going to be the outside, is upsetting. The side that gets longer, the inside, is drawing out. Look at that. Nothing to it. Where'd that hammer go? There it is. I've got to get heat right down there a little bit. I need some heat right there. See how that, let's see if that'll drive in. Now, if you still got color in the metal, you don't need to use your striker. So you can see that another 10 minutes of fine tuning, I could get that handle straight, right? Especially if I wanted to roll that back and forth and play with it, get another hammer working. But you can also see that this rosebud put a lot of heat in a large area. What I'm going to do next is something that more people might have to deal with, and that is modifying a wrench or a screwdriver to get into a tough spot. You're working on your car, it's 1 a.m., everything's closed. Your open-end wrench won't fit, your box wrench won't get on there, you don't have a socket that'll get on it, but you realize if I could bend the end of this wrench just about 45 degrees, I could get the work done. I've gone back to the cutting torch. I'm going to turn the pressures down. I got pressure down about 7 on acetylene, about 20 on oxygen. That's pretty standard. I'm going to try to turn this on with my hands full. Striker, fire, looking for a neutral flame. That white feather is unconsumed fuel. We turn that down with more oxygen. Give it a blast. All right. Now I just want a tight bend at about 45 degrees. In fact, let me put this crescent wrench out, this vice grip out on the end, so I don't have to juggle that when everything's ready. I mean, you can see yourself needing to do this, right? Every mechanic at one time or another wishes his wrench was just a little different. About 45 degrees. Now don't quench it. This is medium high carbon steel. Don't quench it because it'll get brittle, it'll probably crack, so just let it cool off in the air. It's called air slack. Okay, so let me throw this in here. This is a heat gun. It gets up to like 1100 degrees. And sometimes that's handy, you know, for helping the bubbles out of epoxy or heating up knife scales that are epoxied in the wrong spot, or you got to bend a piece of conduit and you don't want to burn it with your weed burner, which always happens to me. Anyhow, so there are a number of ways to use this, even in a shop like mine. And if you have other suggestions or ideas for uses for a weed burner or heat or fire generally, please put them in the comments, because I, for one, am going to be reading the comments to see what it is that I didn't know about fire in the shop that I'm going to know after we post this video. All right, now maybe you need to make a particular center punch or a nail set or a scratch-all, or you just need to harden up the tip of a screwdriver to where it's really hard. Let me show you that any kind of a torch, even the MAP gas or the propane torch, will get a small piece of steel up past critical temperature, which is dull red. Now this is not small, this is a hay rake, but it's going to demonstrate how you can make a piece hard, and then I'm going to show you how to temper it. So first of all, I want to show you that this is tough. That's a very good piece of steel. I'm going to make it so hard that it breaks like a piece of glass, just with a little heat and a little water. That gray color is an indication that your screwdriver tip or your scratch-all got hard. Let's see if it's brittle. Look at that, my friends. We changed the very nature of the steel just with a torch in the shop. Now to temper that, let me show you how if you want to harden and temper back to a spring temper, it's just not that hard. It goes like this. So tempering that piece of steel means putting in enough heat to raise the temperature enough to soften it. Clearly this back here now is very hot, and you can begin to see the tempering colors creeping down that bar. Can you see those colors right there? Beginning to show up. They're not showing up too good. There, right there, there's some bronze, some purple. Put in a little more heat to push it. The blue, that indicates temperatures that will soften that hard steel at the end. There we go, there's some tempering colors running. Gotta have some patience. So we're getting a condition now where this up here is going to be soft, and this down here, see the bronze clear out to that hard end? That bronze right there is a pretty good center punch. It's going to stop the colors from running down. There's a bronze temper, about 450 degrees. Pretty good for a center punch. No good for a spring. So one more thing before we go outside and show you the beauty of a weed burner is that an acetylene rig can hold also, besides cutting torch tips and rosebud tips, welding tips for welding and brazing and soldering. Smaller, more controlled flames, easier to get neutral, one very sharp cone. If I had a filler rod here, I could physically weld, creating a molten pool, two pieces of steel together, but I'm just going to create a molten pool to kind of demonstrate, I'm not very good at it, the idea that you can weld, braze, and solder. This is mild steel. There's not enough carbon in there to harden it, so it doesn't mind getting plunged into cold water. So I think this is a number 4 tip, pretty good size. I mean, that's as big as a big pencil lead. And it created a little bead. You see that? It's kind of wide, but you can see that that bead could be pushed along, add filler rod, have another piece of steel right alongside there, create a little fillet weld or a butt weld. These things will fuse steel together. They also will melt brazing rod or solder to glue it together, which is different than welding, but it does stick. This is a piece of standard brass brazing rod. I don't think this is what that is. I don't have any idea what that material is. Look at this. No sparks, it's not steel, maybe that's silica bronze. What do you guys think? What I want to show you now is a tool that I use a lot, and it always speeds things up when I need it. A propane weed burner is good for a lot more than just burning weeds. But it will do that. Let me show you how a weed burner can connect you with Japanese construction. So one of the things we learn if we become familiar with things that people did in the past is we don't have to have every modern convenience. For instance, you don't have to buy expensive wood finishes to finish exterior wood. The Japanese did it with fire for a long, long time, and they called it, I think, shoshugiban, something like that. Correct me in the notes, in the comments. But the idea is, you just put a light coat of charcoal on the outside of your lumber. That would be a very light shoshugiban, I think. Let's do it a little heavier. So let me make this clear. I don't know a thing about this. I do think that the wire brush I used right there was not the right one. Check out some woodworking channels that know. But I know that there's some indication that the charcoal is wire brushed to some extent. I don't know. But I can see that a clear coat over the top of that would make a very intriguing finish. And more importantly, the charcoal apparently resists rot, and bugs hate it. Let me show you the two things I do most often with fire in the shop, and then we'll go over and talk about how that propane conversion worked out with a cutting torch. But first of all, a weed burner. It's become vitally important to me. And the first thing is, when you turn these on, I learned this from the comments, You turn that all the way back up so that the second O-ring on that stem, I think, seals. I use a striker instead of a match, and I still singe the hair off my fingers, and start a fire. That is so much easier than a match. So over the years, I've wasted a lot of time trying to start the fire in the coal forge, whether it's building little campfires and using a match, or, you know, a paper towel soaked in diesel and then lay the coke on there slowly, and yes. And then one day it dawned on me, man, you got a fire right there on the end of your torch. So I just turn on the fan, give it a shot, and as soon as the wood or the coke ignites, shut off the acetylene and give it the oxygen. Because I've already got the fuel, and I just need to accelerate it. Open the blast, and just like that, that'll be to a welding heat in 90 seconds. So I just finished this conversion, right? Setting up a situation where I can use propane as the fuel. My friends at the welding shop said, look, propane is so corrosive, you've got to run it through a dedicated regulator because it will deteriorate. It's not good for the regulator that you use with acetylene. And they pointed out to me that it takes a different tip. You see that? That tip is made for LP gas. Natural gas also. Now, I don't know what difference, but it is radically different in its construction. We may show that to you. There's two pieces. There's an interior piece and an exterior piece, unlike the acetylene tip. So, anyhow, let me just show you how this thing works, and then I'm looking forward to what you tell me about the things that I should have included in this video. So a couple things jump out at me as being different with the fire itself. And for your information, I've got this set on about 15 pounds on the fuel, which is higher than I use the acetylene. I don't know if that's right or wrong. I'm using about the same pressure on the oxygen, 20. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm cracking it, and it really billows. It's just different than the way acetylene lights. It doesn't want to stick to the tip. I got to wait for apparently for the tip to warm up. Turn that down. There, it's stuck. Whoop. Give it a little bit of oxygen. So I'm not sure about how this should be regulated. Not sticking. There we go. Neutral flame. Siri tells me that this is almost twice as hot as the fire that was naturally aspirated just using the oxygen in the air. When you force pure oxygen through there, it gets up around 5,100 degrees. Now acetylene burns around 5,500, I think. So it heats slower. There we go. Now I'm just sure that if we heated this shaft up with this fire, it wouldn't take near as long. But I don't think I'm going to do that right now. This video is just about long enough. Anyway, did I cover everything? No. But this is the way fire benefits me in my shop. I do carpentry, I do woodwork, I do blacksmithing and fabrication and sawmilling and various things. If you're interested in these things, check out the Essential Craftsman Academy. There's a lot of guys there interested in these things, and twice a month we get together in a live Zoom meeting, and everybody brings their projects and their solutions and their questions and their expertise and their friendship. They offer friendship. It's a community that I treasure, and you might like it. So check that out if you get a minute. And in the meantime, anytime you bring fire into your shop, you better pay attention to safety, because gas leaks, combustible fuels, sparks, grinders, there's any number of ways, electrical shorts, to cause yourself a real problem with the tool that was one of the first tools that we needed when we emerged from wherever we emerged. Fire in the shop is a real handy thing. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.